The loud knock on our front door made my heart race instantly. "Mrs. Sure, you need to calm your child, or I'll have to call the police," the neighbor shouted through the glass, his voice sharp and accusing. My hands trembled as I opened the door, trying to steady my breathing. "My name is Kimberly Shore. I'm 36 years old, married to Jason, and mother to our lively 8-year-old son, Noah. I never imagined that a simple game in our backyard would turn our home into a battlefield." It was a bright Saturday morning, and Noah was laughing, chasing bubbles across the lawn, completely oblivious to the storm about to hit. The neighbor, Greg, stood on the edge of his property, waving a folder in the air like it was a weapon. "This noise is unacceptable," he continued, his eyes cold. "And if it doesn't stop, I'm filing a complaint. This isn't just about your kid. This affects the whole neighborhood." I felt a lump in my throat. How could a child's innocent play become a legal threat? Jason appeared behind me, wrapping a protective arm around my shoulders. "It's okay, Kim. Don't let him rattle you," he whispered, but I could feel the tension knotting inside him too. I looked at Noah, his tiny face scrunched in confusion as he held a bright green bubble wand. "Mommy, why is he yelling?" he asked, his voice trembling. My chest tightened. My sweet boy, who just wanted to play outside, suddenly seemed fragile in the face of adult aggression. I tried to keep my voice calm, though it shook with anger and fear. "Noah was just playing," I said, turning to Greg. "We're well within our property boundaries. He's not hurting anyone." Greg smirked, pulling out a set of documents from the folder. "You should check your deeds carefully. You might be surprised about where your property line actually is." My stomach dropped. Property lines? Our home, our sanctuary, suddenly felt like it was under siege. Every memory of building this life flashed before my eyes. Painting the nursery for Noah, celebrating our first anniversary in this very backyard, hosting barbecues with friends and family. And now a stranger threatened to turn it all upside down, using fear as a weapon. I could feel a rush of panic, mixed with anger, and a flicker of suspicion. Why would he want to intimidate us? Why now? Jason took my hand and whispered again, "Let's not jump to conclusions. We'll handle this calmly." But my mind raced. Could Greg really be trying to manipulate us? Could this be more than just a complaint about noise? Something in his smirk, the way he held those papers, suggested that this was just the beginning. And that's when I realized our peaceful home and Noah's safety might be at stake in ways I couldn't yet see. The next few days were tense, each one stretching longer than the last. I found myself checking the backyard obsessively, watching Noah play as if the neighbor's glare could pierce the air and punish him for simply being a child. Jason tried to reassure me, but even he seemed unsettled. "He's just trying to intimidate us," he said one evening while we sat on the porch, holding cups of cold tea. "We've done nothing wrong. We own this house. Don't let him get inside your head." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. Every little noise felt like a threat. The sound of a lawnmower at noon, the creak of our fence in the wind, my mind twisted each sound into a warning. And Greg's frequent glances, his seemingly casual strolls past our property line, felt deliberate, menacing. One afternoon, he leaned against the fence with a smirk, holding what looked like a measuring tape. "I think you should reconsider your property boundaries," he called over. My hands shook, and Noah clutched my leg. "Mommy, is he mad at me?" I crouched to his level, forcing a smile, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. I started digging through old property papers, searching for any sign that Greg could be right. The maps, the old deeds, the surveys, they all confirmed our ownership, yet a creeping doubt gnawed at me. Could there have been a mistake decades ago? Could some loophole exist that we hadn't known about? I couldn't shake the feeling that Greg's persistence wasn't about a mistake. Something about his timing, his attitude, suggested a calculated plan to unsettle us, to make us question our own home. One evening, while reviewing the deeds with Jason, I noticed a faintly stamped, barely legible note on one of the older surveys. Check reference 1972 amendment. It read. We looked at each other, realizing neither of us had any idea what it meant. I'll handle it, Jason said, but I could tell he was just as uneasy. I wanted to protect our home, but more than that, I wanted to protect Noah from the fear that had already begun to settle in our lives. Something told me this was only the beginning of a battle we couldn't yet see clearly. We spoke to a real estate lawyer that week, trying to clarify the situation, but Greg's threats had already planted seeds of doubt. It's unusual, but not impossible, the lawyer said, peering over glasses at the documents. Sometimes old surveys don't match modern lines exactly. You should document everything, just in case. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just a harmless neighbor dispute anymore. It was a potential legal battle that could affect our family, our home, and the sense of safety we had built for Noah. And with each passing day, Greg's presence loomed larger in our lives, an unseen shadow that seemed to watch every move, waiting. By the time night fell, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every gust of wind against the windows made me flinch. I kept imagining Noah's small hands gripping mine, looking up with wide, innocent eyes, and I realized how far this neighbor's manipulation could reach, not just our property, but our peace, our family's foundation. And that was when I knew. We had to fight, or we risked losing more than just land. The following morning, I noticed Noah playing near the swing set, his laughter echoing across the yard. It should have been ordinary, peaceful, but my heart raced. Greg's car was parked conspicuously across the street, engine idling. I clenched my fists, feeling that familiar surge of fear. Jason placed a calming hand on my shoulder. "He's watching," I whispered, and he nodded silently, eyes narrowing. We decided to document everything. Every noise complaint, every suspicious visit, every interaction with Greg. I started keeping a log, writing down times, dates, and details of what occurred. Jason helped, but even he looked frustrated and weary. "I didn't expect a neighbor to turn our life upside down," he muttered one evening. I tried to sleep that night, but the creak of the fence and the wind made me jump awake, heart pounding, imagining Noah trapped or in danger. Noah sensed the tension too. He asked questions, innocent but pointed. "Mom, why is Greg always staring?" he said, tugging at my sleeve. I hugged him close, hiding my own unease. "He's just grumpy," I said, though my voice faltered. But deep down, I knew this was more than grumpiness. The pattern, the timing, the persistence, it felt deliberate, a calculated effort to intimidate us, to weaken our confidence in our own home. Jason suggested talking to Greg directly. I hesitated, picturing a confrontation that could spiral out of control. But I knew we couldn't remain passive. That afternoon, we walked to the edge of the property where the boundary markers were barely visible through the grass. Greg appeared at the fence almost immediately, arms crossed, expression smug. "I hope you're ready to discuss your mistake," he said, voice dripping with false civility. My stomach sank. I realized this conversation could determine the security of our home and the peace of mind for our son. I took a deep breath and tried to remain composed. "We're confident in our property lines," I said, holding my ground. Greg smirked and pulled out a folded document. "I have the original survey showing your fence encroaches," he said. My heart thumped in disbelief. Could he really have found something that would jeopardize us? Or was this another ploy, another attempt to intimidate and manipulate? I looked down at Noah, playing innocently, and I promised myself I would protect him, no matter the cost. By evening, the tension hadn't eased. I spent hours poring over old property maps, historical records, and legal filings. Each document I examined deepened the uncertainty, but also strengthened my resolve. We weren't going to be bullied out of our home. This was not just about land anymore. It was about the safety, the dignity, and the stability of our family. And as I turned off the lights that night, I felt a steely determination. Greg's manipulations had started, but they weren't going to break us. The next morning brought an uneasy calm. Noah ran around the yard, pretending to be a superhero, while I watched him with a mixture of love and anxiety. Every laugh felt fragile, as if Greg's presence hovered invisibly above our home. Jason tried to lighten the mood. "Let's not let him ruin this," he said, ruffling Noah's hair, but even his words sounded hollow to me. I decided to double-check the property lines one more time. Walking the edges of our yard, I measured and marked, comparing with the original survey we'd found months ago in the town archives. Everything pointed to our land. Our home had been ours all along. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Greg had something hidden, some trick up his sleeve. Every shadow, every glance from him made me uneasy. Later, Greg came over under the guise of casual conversation. "I just want to make sure everything is fair," he said, smiling, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Jason stood next to me, protective, arms crossed. "We're confident in our boundaries," he replied firmly. I stayed silent, heart racing, sensing a storm beneath his polite words. Greg's smile didn't reach his eyes. I realized this wasn't a neighborly dispute. It was a battle for control, a psychological game, and he had already decided to push us to our limits. Noah, blissfully unaware of the tension, ran to greet Greg with a drawing he made. "Look, it's our house," he said proudly, holding up the picture. Greg glanced at it briefly, then his gaze returned to me, sharp and unreadable. "Cute," he said slowly, almost mockingly. I felt my stomach twist. How could someone look at a child so innocently celebrating home and see opportunity for manipulation? Fear gripped me, stronger than before. I knew that protecting Noah meant preparing for the battle Greg wanted to wage. That evening, I sat with Jason at the kitchen table, maps spread across the surface. "We have proof, but he's smart," I said, frustration and fear warring in my chest. Jason nodded, silent, but I could see the worry in his eyes. This wasn't going to end quickly, and I had to stay sharp. Every decision, every conversation with Greg could tip the balance. And as I tucked Noah into bed that night, I whispered a promise. No one would intimidate our family or steal what was ours. The following morning, tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. I had barely opened the blinds when I noticed Greg leaning over the fence, watching Noah play. His stare wasn't casual, it was calculated, evaluating every move, every laugh, every squeal. My heart pounded. Jason came outside, coffee in hand, sensing the unease. His staring again, I whispered, gripping his arm. Greg raised a finger and pointed at something in our yard. "You need to keep the noise down," he said with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. I froze. Keep the noise down? Noah was just a child, playing harmlessly. "This is ridiculous," Jason said firmly. "Our son has every right to play in his own yard." Greg chuckled softly, as if enjoying a private joke. Rights? Maybe. But boundaries exist, Mrs. Shore. The words struck me like a slap. Boundaries? He was twisting them, trying to make us question ourselves. My mind raced through our property deeds, our surveys, every legal document we had. Everything confirmed our ownership, but Greg had a way of making reality feel uncertain. My stomach churned with anxiety. I spent the day pacing, researching neighborhood regulations, checking noise ordinances, and reviewing property law. Every phone call felt tense. Yes, our property is legal, the clerk assured me, but the shadow of doubt Greg cast lingered. By evening, I felt drained but determined. This wasn't just about a noisy child. This was about control, manipulation, and intimidation. Noah's laughter rang out as he ran through the yard, oblivious to the tension. I watched him and felt a surge of protectiveness. I couldn't let Greg scare us. We were a family, and we had a home, and I would fight to keep it safe. Jason held my hand, and together, we prepared for the storm we knew was coming, the neighbors' subtle war that had only just begun. Over the next few days, the tension escalated. Greg seemed to appear everywhere, his presence a constant shadow over our yard. Every time Noah played outside, Greg would shake his head, muttering about noise complaints. The final straw came one afternoon when he stood at the fence with a folder in his hands, his eyes gleaming. "I'm calling the authorities if this doesn't stop," he said, voice cold and measured. My stomach dropped. Jason clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. "His bluffing," he muttered, but I couldn't shake the fear. The thought of police showing up at our home over innocent playtime filled me with dread. I held Noah close, feeling his small arms wrap around my waist. "Mom, am I in trouble?" he asked, eyes wide. My heart ached. I wanted to promise him everything would be okay, but the unease gnawed at me. I decided to fight back with knowledge. I pulled out the official property documents, neighborhood maps, and the deed. Everything clearly showed our boundary lines. Greg's claims were baseless. But proving facts to someone like him felt daunting. He seemed to thrive on intimidation. Each interaction left me more anxious, my mind racing with what ifs. Could a neighbor really manipulate the law and threaten a family's security? That night, I barely slept, replaying every exchange in my mind. My thoughts circled endlessly. What if he really calls the police? What if he finds a way to lower our property's value and force us out? I watched Noah sleeping, the soft rise and fall of his chest a fragile reminder of innocence under siege. I knew I had to protect him, even if it meant standing up to a man who seemed to believe the rules didn't apply to him. By morning, I had made a decision. I would research local ordinances, consult lawyers, and prepare for a confrontation. This was more than a dispute over noise. It was a battle to secure our home, our family, and our peace of mind. And deep down, I knew Greg wouldn't give up easily. He was playing a longer game, one that could cost us everything if I wasn't vigilant. The letter arrived on a grey Wednesday morning, wedged between the usual pile of mail and the stack of flyers. My hands trembled as I picked it up, a sinking feeling spreading through my chest. It was from Greg, the neighbor. The envelope was thick, heavy, and official-looking, stamped with a legal seal I didn't recognize. My stomach churned. I tore it open slowly, each second stretching like a thin wire of dread. Noise complaints have been filed against your household. If these disturbances continue, further legal action may be taken. The letter read, bland and cold, but every word was a hammer against my peace of mind. I blinked, hoping my eyes were deceiving me. Noah was just playing in the backyard. His laughter, the sound of a small plastic ball bouncing off the pavement, the squeak of his sneakers against the patio, these were not disturbances. They were the joyful sounds of an 8-year-old child being a child. Jason looked over my shoulder as I held the letter, his expression tight. "It's probably just a warning. We don't need to worry too much," he said, trying to calm me, but the quiver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. I nodded, forcing myself to breathe deeply, but every instinct screamed at me that this was more than a simple complaint. I couldn't shake the suspicion that Greg had an agenda, and it had nothing to do with noise levels. Memories of past encounters flooded me, the casual comments about our property line, the way Greg had jokingly suggested our yard might be encroaching on his space. I remembered the time he showed up at our barbecue, I was calculating, asking questions about the layout of our garden. At the time, I laughed it off, thinking I was imagining malice where there was none. Now, with this letter in my hand, all those little moments clicked into place like pieces of a sinister puzzle. I stepped outside, calling Noah to come in. His small feet padded quickly across the yard, a flash of innocence I desperately wanted to protect. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, tilting his head, his big brown eyes full of concern. I hugged him tightly, whispering reassurances I didn't fully believe myself. This wasn't just about noise anymore. Greg's intentions were clear. He wanted to intimidate us, to destabilize the sense of safety Jason and I had fought for in this house. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind ran over every scenario, every conversation with Greg that now seemed loaded with hidden meaning. Jason tried to distract me, suggesting we look into noise ordinances or install security cameras, but the fear in me had already rooted itself too deeply. What if this was just the beginning? What if Greg's aim wasn't simply complaints but forcing us into a position where our home, our sanctuary, would be devalued or taken advantage of? By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to let fear dictate our lives. I started documenting everything. The letters, the dates, every interaction with Greg. Photos of the backyard, videos of Noah playing, recordings of any confrontation. Each file, each note, felt like armor, preparing us for the inevitable escalation. Jason watched silently, pride and concern warring in his gaze. "You really think he's trying to do more than complain?" he asked softly. I nodded, feeling the fire of determination ignite in me. This wasn't just about property lines anymore, this was about protecting my child, my family, and the home we had built together. And that was when I realized something else. If Greg could manipulate, threaten, and lie to push us out, he wasn't just a neighbor. He was a predator in plain sight, using the law and social pressure as weapons. The fight for our home had just begun. The next morning, I woke with a sense of urgency that I couldn't shake. Every sound outside our window, a car door, a barking dog, even the wind brushing against the fence, felt like a countdown, a warning. I knew I had to confront the situation before it spiraled further. Jason was already in the kitchen, coffee in hand, staring at the latest stack of mail. I waved the envelope at him. "It's happening again," I said, voice tight with tension. Noah was just playing, and now Greg says he's going to call the authorities. He sighed, rubbing his face, and for the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. "Maybe we should talk to a lawyer? Just to be safe?" But I could feel my own frustration rising. This wasn't just about safety anymore, it was about power, manipulation, and fear. I couldn't just stand by and let our neighbor dictate our lives with intimidation. I had to dig deeper, understand why Greg was so intent on escalating things. I started going through old property documents, maps, and surveys, trying to see if there was any validity to Greg's claims. Every line on the map, every note from the city office felt like a clue in a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. The more I investigated, the more it became clear. Greg had been slowly setting this up, subtly shifting boundaries, misrepresenting facts, and now he had the audacity to threaten our family. I couldn't let him get away with it. Noah came running into the kitchen, holding his soccer ball. "Mom, can I play outside?" he asked, innocent and unaware of the tension thick in the air. I knelt down to his level, holding his small hands in mine. "Not yet, sweetheart," I said softly, though inside I was burning with anger. Protecting him had just become my top priority. I needed evidence, witnesses, and a plan to stop Greg before this escalated beyond repair. I reached out to neighbors I trusted, subtly asking about previous disputes with Greg, trying to piece together a timeline. A few hesitated, clearly nervous, but one elderly neighbor leaned in and whispered, "He's always done this, tries to manipulate everyone to his advantage." That whisper sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a legal issue anymore, it was psychological warfare. Greg was testing our limits, seeing how far he could push us before we cracked. Jason and I held a long meeting that evening, spreading maps, notes, and emails across the kitchen table. "We can fight this," I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "But we need to be smart, methodical. Protect Noah, protect ourselves, and don't let him see us falter." I could see his shoulders relax slightly, but his eyes still held fear. Fear for the house, fear for our child, fear for the family we were trying to protect. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floor, every rustle outside felt amplified, like an invisible observer was tracking our every move. I knew Greg would strike again, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. And I had to be ready. The truth was beginning to surface, and I could sense the climax approaching. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was a battle for our family, our security, and our peace of mind. And I was determined not to lose. The following morning, the tension outside our house was almost tangible. Every sound, cars driving by, the wind rustling the leaves, even the distant bark of a dog, felt amplified. My stomach knotted as I thought about what might come next. I couldn't let this escalate any further. I grabbed the folder of property documents and letters I had been compiling and sat at the kitchen table with Jason. "I've been going over everything," I said, trying to steady my voice. "There's no way our fence is on his land. These documents prove it." Jason nodded, rubbing his temples. "Then why is he pushing so hard? What's he really after?" His question made me pause. It wasn't just about the fence. It was about power, control, greed. I realized Greg had been calculating this for months, maybe even years, manipulating perceptions, planting doubt, and now he was ready to make his move. My mind raced with possibilities. How far would he go to lower our property's value and buy it cheap? I decided to confront him, but cautiously. I drafted a letter, polite but firm, demanding he stop threatening us, and I hinted at legal action if he continued. The thought of a potential court battle made my heart pound. Could we protect our family and home without giving him the satisfaction of seeing us panic? I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but I knew I had to be strong, for Noah, for Jason, and for myself. Late that evening, Noah came running in from playing outside, his face glowing with excitement. "Mom, look! I scored a goal!" he shouted, oblivious to the tension thick in the air. I hugged him tightly, feeling a mixture of love and fear. Protecting him had become my top priority, and every move I made now would be calculated around that. I couldn't let Greg's threats ruin our lives. I had to expose him before he could do any more damage. As I went over the documents again, I noticed subtle inconsistencies in the survey maps Greg had provided. Lines didn't match old municipal records, dates seemed tampered with. I felt a rush of both anger and determination. This wasn't a simple dispute over property, it was manipulation, deception, and an attempt to take advantage of us. And I would not let him succeed. I started planning the next steps. Contacting the city surveyor, gathering witnesses, and documenting everything. The battle lines were drawn, and I felt a surge of resolve. By bedtime, Jason and I sat together reviewing our strategy. We can't let him intimidate us, I said quietly, but firmly. Every action he takes, we document it. Every threat he makes, we're ready. I could see the worry in his eyes, but I also sensed his growing confidence. We were no longer reacting. We were preparing to fight back. And deep down, I knew this was far from over. The next confrontation would reveal the truth, and I intended to be ready. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop. Text messages, missed calls, emails. Greg had escalated overnight. He'd left another note on our front door, this one more aggressive, more threatening. I read it aloud to Jason, my hands trembling slightly. "If you don't comply, I will involve the authorities," it said. The words hit like a punch. My stomach sank, and a wave of fear washed over me. Fear for our home. Fear for Noah. Fear for what this man might do next. Jason rubbed my back, trying to calm me, but his own tension was evident. "We need to document everything," he said firmly. "We can't let him intimidate us, but we can't ignore him either." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. Every instinct screamed to protect Noah, to keep him from witnessing this growing hostility. The thought of my son being scared, of his safe world being invaded by someone else's greed, made my heart ache. I could feel my body tense, my mind racing with plans and contingencies. By mid-morning, I had contacted the city surveyor. I explained the situation, providing copies of our documents and the disputed survey maps Greg had presented. "We'll verify this immediately," the surveyor promised. Relief mixed with anxiety. Every minute felt stretched thin, like the calm before a storm. Greg was counting on us hesitating, on us showing fear, on us making a mistake. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. Noah was playing in the backyard, laughing as he kicked his soccer ball. I watched him from the kitchen window, heart swelling with love and terror simultaneously. Could he understand why I was so tense? Could he feel the unease in the air? I didn't want to scare him, but I couldn't pretend nothing was wrong. Protecting him had become my absolute priority. Hours later, Greg appeared in his yard, staring at our fence as if daring us to react. My hands gripped the windowsill. I could feel anger bubbling under the surface. "This isn't over," I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. I knew the confrontation was inevitable. And when it came, we had to be ready, not just to defend our property, but to stand our ground as a family. Every document, every photograph, every note we had gathered would be our shield. By evening, I had made a plan. Jason would handle direct communication, while I prepared evidence and witnesses. I had called neighbors who had seen the original property markers, and they agreed to provide statements if needed. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but I felt a spark of determination. This wasn't just about land, it was about justice, about protecting my family, and ensuring no one could take advantage of our lives. We were ready to face whatever came next, and I refused to back down. The next morning, Greg's presence was impossible to ignore. He was standing near our fence again, arms crossed, eyes cold and calculating. Noah ran out to retrieve his ball, laughing as he normally did, completely unaware of the storm brewing. My heart lurched. I ran after him, putting myself between Greg and my son. "Stay here, Noah," I said, my voice trembling but firm. I could feel anger and fear colliding inside me. This man was trying to provoke us, and I refused to let him intimidate my family. Jason appeared beside me, holding the surveyor's maps and our notes. "We have proof," he said. "We're not moving a single inch." I nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Greg smirked, clearly expecting us to back down, but the smirk faded when Jason stepped forward. "Enough, Greg," Jason said. "We're going to the authorities if this harassment doesn't stop." My chest heaved. I could see the tension in Greg's face. He was realizing we weren't scared anymore. Noah looked up at me, eyes wide. "Mom, is he going to be mad?" I knelt, brushing his hair from his forehead. "No, baby. We're going to be okay," I reassured him, though my stomach was still tight with anxiety. Seeing my son's trust in me strengthened my resolve. I would fight for him, for our home, for our life. This confrontation had become more than a property dispute. It was a battle for safety, dignity, and peace of mind. Hours passed with Greg pacing, shouting, and waving papers, but we stood firm. Every call we made to the surveyor, every photograph we presented, chipped away at his confidence. By late afternoon, he left, muttering threats under his breath, but his authority had clearly been broken. I exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and adrenaline. We had faced the first real battle and survived. My family was still intact, my home still ours, and my determination was stronger than ever. I watched the sunset from the porch, Noah asleep in his room, Jason beside me. The neighborhood seemed calm, deceptively peaceful. But I knew this wasn't over. Greg would return, and we would need to stay vigilant. And yet, there was a sense of empowerment blooming inside me. We had proven that we were not victims. That even in fear, even in uncertainty, we could stand tall and protect what mattered most. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. No longer just reacting to Greg's threats, I decided it was time to take control. I called our attorney first thing, explaining everything in detail: the harassment, the falsified documents, the intimidation. "We need to file a formal complaint and get a surveyor involved," she said. Her voice was calm but authoritative, giving me a sense of stability I hadn't felt in days. I felt a spark of hope ignite. This was no longer a passive struggle, we were taking the fight into our own hands. Jason and I spent the day preparing evidence. Every email, every photo, every note from previous interactions with Greg was meticulously organized. I wanted a clear record, unassailable and professional. We even hired a private surveyor to remeasure the property lines and verify the official records. Watching him work, I realized how vulnerable we had allowed ourselves to become, and how easily we could protect our home if we stayed organized and persistent. Noah played nearby, oblivious to the adult battles unfolding around him. I watched him, heart swelling with determination. This wasn't just about property, it was about giving him a safe, happy childhood. I couldn't let a manipulative neighbor steal that from him. "Mom, can we build a fort here?" he asked, holding a stick like a sword. I laughed softly and nodded. Yes, we would build forts, plant flowers, and live in peace. And no one would take that away. By evening, the attorney confirmed our next steps. Official notices would be sent to Greg, the surveyor's report would be submitted to the county, and a cease and desist order would formally protect our property. I felt a thrill of empowerment. Jason squeezed my hand, eyes gleaming with pride. "We're finally in control," he said. I nodded, feeling a surge of courage. The fear that had gripped me for weeks was giving way to clarity and determination. As I tucked Noah into bed that night, I whispered a promise I would never break. "Noah, this is our home. And no one will take it from us." He smiled sleepily, and I kissed his forehead, feeling a deep, protective love. Tomorrow, we would face Greg again, but this time, we would be prepared. And for the first time in weeks, I felt ready for whatever came next. The morning after we submitted everything to our attorney, a calm settled over our home that I hadn't felt in weeks. The tension that had shadowed every moment of our lives, the fear of losing our property, the constant anxiety over Noah's safety, was slowly lifting. Greg had responded with anger in his first emails, but with the legal documents in place and the surveyor's report confirming our property lines, his attempts to intimidate us had no real power. I realized that control had shifted. We weren't reacting anymore. We were leading. Jason and I spent the day outside with Noah, planting flowers along the real boundary lines, the surveyor's markers now permanent. As Noah dug in the dirt, his laughter echoed across the yard, a pure sound that reminded me of why we had fought so hard. Each bloom we planted felt like reclaiming a piece of our peace and our future. I watched Jason smile, the weight of weeks of worry lifted from his shoulders, and I felt a profound gratitude for his partnership. We had weathered the storm together, and our family was stronger for it. I also reflected on my own strength. I had doubted myself, worried about overreacting, questioned whether I was too emotional or too protective, but every step of courage and careful planning had led us here. I realized that setting boundaries, standing firm, and insisting on fairness was not just about property, it was about self-respect and protecting the people you love. I could feel a newfound confidence in myself, the kind that comes from surviving a challenge and winning not through luck, but through deliberate action and conviction. Greg eventually backed down, though his bitterness lingered. That didn't matter. What mattered was our home, our family, and the lessons we had learned. Noah's room was now filled with the sunlight of late afternoon, and he ran freely in the yard without fear. Jason and I held hands on the porch, watching him play, knowing that the boundary lines of our home and our hearts were finally secure. We had defended our sanctuary, and I understood something essential. Courage and persistence were the only weapons we truly needed. That night, as I watched Noah fall asleep, I whispered to myself a truth I would carry forever. Strength isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's measured in small, steady steps toward what you know is right. We had faced intimidation, deceit, and fear, and emerged not just intact, but empowered. Our home was ours, our son was safe, and our family was stronger than ever. And for the first time in a long time, I slept knowing that I had fought for everything that truly mattered, and won.